The Florida Panthers are one of three teams battling for two wild card spots in the East, but they are also in a little bit of a slump, a three-game losing streak. Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers joins us to talk about what Florida needs to do to qualify for the playoffs. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Florida Panthers, Armando Velez. And Armando, tough battle, three teams battling for two spots, my Islanders, your Florida Panthers, and the Pittsburgh Penguins, and yet nobody seems to want to claim these playoff spots. Everybody's inconsistent. Three-game losing streak for Florida. What's going on?
Yeah, it's crazy because after the Florida Panthers defeated the Detroit Red Wings on Monday, it was a night where Alexander Barkov got the record for most points in Florida Panthers history, and it was a game that leapfrogged the Florida Panthers into that second wild card spot at the time of jumping over the Pittsburgh Penguins when they lost to Ottawa Senators. And it's the mindset was, wow, they're in this spot. Now it's time to not have the other teams take it from them. But I mean, in that game against the Detroit Red Wings, they lose Sam Bennett in the middle of the third period. And then look what happens. The Florida Panthers don't win a single game ever since that. Of course, two of the three games for the Panthers were against playoff teams. I mean, two teams who could make it to the Stanley Cup final in the New York Rangers and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But the tough one is the Philly game, the second end of a back-to-back. Alex Lyon starting on that one. I still think that if Sergei Bobrovsky were to start that one, the game would have been closer, but not necessarily the Panthers winning. But that game was mostly the Florida Panthers. It was just a bad few shifts, in my opinion, against the Philadelphia Flyers on Tuesday night. But then against the Maple Leafs, they don't really have a jump until until the 10-minute mark of the first period, and then they're falling behind already. And in two of the last three games, they even had a lead. They had a lead going against the Philadelphia Flyers, and they had a 2-goal lead against the New York Rangers on Saturday. But I mean, even before that, the Florida Panthers were at their healthiest the day after the trade deadline. And this was the only team in the NHL that did not make a single trade deadline move. And then all of a sudden, Sam Bennett and Alexander Barkov came back into the lineup after missing a week full of games. Anthony Duclair has been back with the Florida Panthers since the end of February. So the Florida Panthers were at their healthiest on March 4th. They go on a 6-0-1 run in a 7-game span, catch up, and now the injury bug started to hit him again with Sam Bennett being out of the lineup the last 3 games for this Panthers team. And it really also comes down to penalty kill. I mean, the Florida Panthers are third in the NHL in total in PIM in the National Hockey League, but number one is Tampa. And they're still middle of the pack in penalty kill percentage. So it's not always an indication of when you take the most penalties is always going to dictate the lack of success on your penalty kill. But this team is just not built to kill penalties at a very strong rate. And it just really comes down to staying out of the penalty box for them. And even in the stretch of losing three straight, they only allowed 1 power play goal in that stretch, and that was a 5-on-3 against the Toronto Maple Leafs, which they had their first 5-on-3 goal in the season. Go figure for this Florida Panthers team that they were on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, go figure. I mean, it seems like Florida has an easy time scoring goals, but they also tend to give up more goals than you would like. What is it? I mean, Bobrovsky is a proven goaltender. Is this a team defense issue?
Yeah, definitely has been. And if you look at the third goal by Phil Pedal on Saturday night, you see that the Aaron Ekblad loses the puck in the middle of the neutral zone, and then he takes it all the way to beat Sergei Bobrovsky on a rush. And Saturday's game against the Rangers, it wasn't really the Rangers cycling the puck around to score goals. It was mostly rushes for the opposition for the Panthers, and that's really been what has hurt this team for for all the season, because sometimes they pinch in their offensive zone, lose the puck as they chip it up the board, as the opposition chips it around the boards, and then there's a rush going the other way. And that's really been what's been hurting the Panthers all season. And Aaron Ekblad might be a number one overall pick, but the last 3 seasons for Aaron Ekblad, he was playing at a Norris caliber level the last 2 seasons before going down. But it looks like that the injuries have really caught up to Ekblad this season, as just he's not the same player that we've seen the last few seasons as far as that. Sergei Bobrovsky, I mean, he's played 15. He started 15 of the last 16 games for this Florida Panthers team. The save percentage and the goals against average doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, where it's 895 in that 15 game stretch, 3.04 goals against average. There's really only 3 or 4 games where Bobrovsky wasn't at his best, but there's only so much that he can do for this Florida Panthers team. And really, the bad stretch for him personally was 2 weeks ago, where it was a stretch of against Chicago, against Winnipeg, but all of those, the Florida Panthers were still able to make comebacks even then. We haven't really seen a version of comeback cats until the second half of the season, where if the Florida Panthers were behind in the beginning of the season, chances are they come out on the losing end. But in that 6-0-1 stretch, they found ways to come back and win games, and it's not a coincidence that health had a lot to do with it. But now you have a little bit of adversity with Bennett being out, and there's a lot of there's a lot of shuffling of the
Yeah.
lines in the last 2 games alone. It's really hard for even me to keep track of it, as someone who watches his team every day and writes the lines down every time there's a shift. I mean, you've had Tkachuk go on the top line with Alexander Barkov and Sam Reinhart, and then you have Carter Verhaeghe going back on the first line as well. Eetu Luostarinen, who's mostly played on the wing with Barkov lately, he had to shift back to center as well. And then when you're having Eetu Luostarinen, who's great defensively, great young player for this Panthers team, going up against, for example, a John Tavares on the second line of the Toronto Maple Leafs, it's just a matchup nightmare for this Florida Panthers team. And with the New York Rangers, they're top heavy, but on Saturday it wasn't even their top guys who were making the impact plays for the Rangers. The Patrick Kane goal, it might show a goal on the score sheet, but if you watch the highlights and you watch the games, that was an own goal by the Panthers, that Patrick Kane just threw it near the slot, and then it's deflected in off of Carter Verhaeghe's stick. So it's also when you stop the top guns for the opposition, the role players have found ways to score, and that's really what's been for the Panthers the last 3 games.
Well, hopefully, from a Panthers perspective, they can clean that up as we head down the stretch for the last few games. Armando, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
They can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers, and it's gonna be a big next 9 games for the Florida Panthers. I've actually calculated point pace as far as how many points are needed for at least to get the final wild card spot, and it's looking like it's going to be 93 points for each of the 3 teams to get there. And for the Florida Panthers, that record is going to need to be 7-2-0 in the last 9 to give yourself a chance to make the postseason. So follow along the show, where I will be chatting every day about this Florida Panthers team as they try to hopefully make that 7-2-0 run and make it back to the postseason for the 4th consecutive year.
All right, Armando, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you as always, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by a product I literally use every day, AG by Athletic Greens. Maybe you're like me. You want to be healthy and eat well, but it's always easier said than done. That is no longer the case with AG1. With a delicious scoop of AG1 in a glass of water every day, you're getting 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all these things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.